What is up, guys? So Arrow has officially ended. The final episode of Arrow, which was the 170th episode, has aired, and Arrow is over. Arrow has had, over the course of those 170 episodes, 8 seasons. The first 6 had 23 episodes, the 7th had 22, and the 8th only had 10. Over the course of those 8 seasons, the show has varied in quality wildly more so than I've ever seen in any other TV show. I mean, Game of Thrones specifically went from being great to bad, but Arrow went from being great to bad to great to okay to great again. It was crazy how inconsistent Arrow was. But with that in mind, in this video I'll be ranking every season of Arrow from worst to best, and I gotta say, ranking like the bottom 4 was easy, but ranking the top 4 was not as easy at all. With that in mind, let's begin with what is by far the worst season of Arrow. Season 4 of Arrow is pretty universally agreed upon to be the worst season of the show, and for good reason. It's such a terrible season. For one, they focus more on Felicity than Oliver. Oliver is absolutely not the main character of this season. He's the main character of the show. He's the main character of every other season and almost every other episode. But this season, the main character is Felicity, and that's probably the biggest problem. Felicity is not the main character of the show. She should not be the main character of the show, and the fact that she was, which drew people to call this season Felicity and Friends instead of Arrow, was absolutely detrimental to this TV show. On top of the fact that it focuses more on Felicity herself, it also focuses more on the relationship drama than anything else, focuses more on that than the superheroics or the hero versus villain storyline. I mean, Oliver Queen versus Damien Darhk is not the main storyline of this season. It's Felicity versus Oliver Queen, and that's just not what we wanted out of the show. That's not what we signed up for, and that's particularly why so many people stopped watching because of this season, including myself. I've said this storyline a lot, like even in the video right before this one, but I stopped watching after they killed off Laurel because I couldn't care less anymore about the show. They just completely jumped the shark, and if it wasn't for the trailer for the next season, I would have never continued to watch the show. The season was that bad. On top of those things, I think Damien Darhk was just too powerful for the Green Arrow. He just wasn't a good villain. He was charismatic, but he wasn't interesting enough to be a good villain. And also, the acting in the season is not very good. I mean, there are some episodes that have good acting. In particular, episode 4 has some good acting that I can remember, but for the most part, even Stephen Amell, it seemed like he just stopped caring with this season for good reason, because the writing just completely fell apart. On top of all of those things, even the technical stuff like the fight scenes are just worse in this season for no apparent reason. For all those reasons, on top of the fact that they killed off Black Canary in the season, season 4 is absolutely god-awful and deserves to be considered the worst season of this show. So Arrow Season 3 isn't actually a bad season. Like, I think the only bad season of Arrow is Season 4, but Season 3 is closer to mediocre than anything, maybe just okay, as it definitely has a lot of problems. However, it has some great fight scenes. Ra's al Ghul, looking back, is actually a decent villain. The problem here is that it does have elements of the problems of Season 4, like the focus on the relationship drama, the focus on Felicity and Felicity, but also the season-long storyline, just in spite of the villain not being bad, is absolutely terrible. Malcolm Merlyn's whole plot in this season just makes no sense. It's so stupid, and Oliver is legitimately a little bit unlikable in the season, and that just doesn't work. While Oliver was not focused on in Season 4, at least he was, I guess, likable. Here, he's not likable, and that is, again, not good for this season. Because of that, Season 3, while not being necessarily bad, because it at least has the good technical things, like at least it has good fight scenes and acting, it does have the problems of the focus on relationship dramas that is just too much, as well as the terrible storyline, and also Oliver is not as likable as he should be. Season 6 is kind of all over the place. Like, I think the first half or so, except for the Deathstroke storyline, is genuinely bad for so many reasons. For one, the Lian Yu explosion resolution is some of the dumbest things we've ever gotten from Arrow. Like, they turned that amazing cliffhanger into just a plot device, just a thing that they used to kill off one character, Samantha Clayton, so that William could be adopted by Oliver, and also put Thea in a coma just because she just didn't want it to have as much screen time as she would have had, and also to give Diggle the nerve damage, which that story storyline made him as unlikable as he would ever get. On top of that, Caden James, as a hacker, not a good villain. I think the actor is good, Michael Emerson, but he's not a good villain for the Green Arrow since he's not a physical threat. He's just a hacker, which works more for Felicity, but that's obviously not what we want to see. The Arrow Civil War made basically all the characters unlikable, and all of that made for just not a good season. It was after season 5 where I got really excited about the show because it was such a great season, but then for those like 13, 14 episodes, the show fell apart again, and it was really, really hard to watch. However, the second half, while not being amazing or anything, definitely is a lot better. Ricardo Diaz was a huge improvement over Caden James. While he still wasn't great and he was not as good as I would have expected, specifically his fighting ability compared to his comic book counterpart, he still was noticeably better than Caden James. All the characters became more likable, the fight scenes even became better, and they stopped focusing on the relationship drama as much as the first half. Because of all those reasons, the second half absolutely saves this season from being lower than season 3 and also on par with season 4, but still I really do not like the first half of the season because of the Lianu explosion resolution and how unlikable most of the characters are. Out of all of the seasons of Arrow that are not considered to be great or even good, I think Season 7 is the best because of the prison storyline. In those 7 episodes, Arrow felt great again like it was in Season 5, 1, and 2, and 8, which are the seasons we haven't got to yet because this storyline is legitimately a great storyline. The setting of the prison allowed Arrow to do so many things like the fight scenes within this confined area. Oliver was separate from Felicity for the most part, which is always a plus, and it gave new light to these cast of characters like especially Bronze Tiger, but also Brick, Derek Sampson, and the new character Stanley Dover. Those characters I think were a very good supporting cast and antagonist for this storyline. On top of that, Ricardo Diaz was so much better than he was in season 6. His rivalry with Oliver, especially at the end of this prison storyline, was legitimately great, and on top of maybe all of those things, the fight scenes were some of the best we've ever gotten from Arrow. The reason this is not considered to be a great season is because of every episode after episode 7 just not working nearly as much, plus the flash forwards are kind of terrible. After episode 7, it just didn't feel like Arrow knew what it was doing. The seasonal storyline just was terrible with the Ninth Circle as the villains. Dante was the villain for a little bit, and then Emiko took over. She was such a bad villain. The acting from that actress just didn't work with the villainous setting that they were trying to do. They brought back Felicity. Oliver and Felicity got a lot more screen time together, which obviously is never a good thing. And the flash forwards went from being actually pretty interesting in the first 7 episodes to just being so hard to watch, and that was pretty evident when it was given its own episode, Star City 2040, which was awful. Thankfully, in Season 8, they did fix all of those problems, but still, the second half of Season 7, or everything after Episode 7, except for maybe these standalone episodes, which were good, was not a good season. Because of that, despite it having a great start with its 7 episodes, Season 7 is still not considered to be a great season. Season 1 is absolutely amazing. It's crazy like the difference here. Like the first 4 range from pretty bad to okay, but literally every season in the top 4 is legitimately great to amazing. Season 1 is very, very good with Malcolm Merlyn being a great villain before he kind of, his character a little bit changed for the worse in later seasons. In Season 1, he was such a great villain with an incredible actor in John Barrowman. It was clear that he was one of the best actors on the show. His rivalry with Oliver also worked very well. The flashbacks I think were awesome. The storyline is quite possibly the most well thought out and well planned season long storyline of any season of maybe the entire Arrowverse, but certainly of Arrow. There's a very small amount of Felicity. I mean, technically there's no Felicity whatsoever. The only season where there's nothing at all, but I mean Felicity does at least like have a crush on Oliver in the season, so there is that. The only reason it's lower than the other seasons, honestly, I don't know. It's just I don't feel like it deserves to be as high as the other 3 seasons of Arrow for other reasons that I honestly can't think of. I don't know, maybe it's not as memorable, maybe it's not as exciting for the most part, but still, it's hard to really like put in words why it's worse than those other 3 seasons, because it's not really worse, it's maybe just not as good. But I do think that Season 1 was not only a great start for Arrow, but one of the best seasons of the Arrowverse ever. So I think Season 2 had a bit of a slow start. Like, I think it took around till episode 8 for the season to really ramp up, and especially with episode 9 for the season to get good. But after that, it was such a consistently high quality, and I completely understand why Season 2 is considered to be the best season of the show, even though I don't really think it is entirely. I do understand why people think that. For instance, Slade is an amazing villain with an exceptional rivalry with Oliver Queen. The flashbacks also are maybe even better than the present-day storyline, and that's not to rag on the present day. That's just how good the flashbacks were in Season 2. They were absolutely amazing. The season-long storyline of the season is very, very good. The acting is great. The fight scenes are definitely up there as some of the best in the entire show. And not only is there a very minimal amount of illicity, but also it wasn't really what it would become later. Honestly, when Season 2 was airing, I didn't have anything against illicity as a concept, and I think that it's because it was only in Season 2, but also it hadn't really become what it would become later. Because of that, I think Season 2 is a very, very good season, and again, I completely understand why it's considered to be the best season of Arrow. However, there are other seasons that I do like more. Season 8 is very different from the rest of the seasons. For one, it's way shorter. It has less than half of the episodes of the other seasons. For another thing, it's the last season of the show, and there's a lot of pre-crossover setup, which in this case will be pre-crisis setup. But honestly, all of those things were good for this season. All those things made this season one of the best seasons of Arrow, and arguably even the best, but for the sake of this video, the second best. It's short to the point. There's barely any bad episodes. In fact, I think there's only one episode that I wouldn't say is great, and that's the second to last one, which wasn't really an episode of this season. It was more of a backdoor pilot, but other than that episode, basically every episode of this season is so good, and there are a lot of very, very good episodes. Like I said, the pre-crisis storyline has a big impact on this season, and that's very good because the level of emotion that is added through the fact that Oliver knows he's going to die, and even the destruction of Earth 2 through Laurel, those things I think elevated the season past other seasons of Arrow because of how emotional that element was. And speaking of Green Arrow and Black Canary, more so than any other season of Arrow, seeing those two team up in this season was so much fun and is exactly what I would have wanted out of the show, except there wasn't any romantic relationship there. But still, the Green Arrow and the Black Canary, they have this team up duo in this season that it's just so fun to watch over the course of this season. And all of those things, plus the fact that there's no Felicity in this season whatsoever. All the illicity except for in the season finale is really just like mentioned, and that's it. There are some issues like the Antimatter is kind of the main villain, but not really. He only appears in one episode, and that's the crossover episode. And also, like I said, the Green Arrow and the Canary setup, those things I don't really love, but for the most part, I do think that this is arguably the best season of Arrow, but for the sake of this video, the second best. I will acknowledge that Season 5 probably has more flaws than the other three seasons, Seasons 1, 2, and 8, and there are flaws that are for some people, I understand why they're not as easy to dismiss, and that's why Season 2 is often considered to be the best season of the show, even though Season 5, in my opinion, is a little bit better, because Season 5 does have more flaws, but still, in spite of these flaws, I think Season 5 is still the best season of Arrow, and the fact that Arrow is now over means that it will forever be the best season of this show. For one, Prometheus is absolutely, in my opinion, the best villain on the show ever. His rivalry with Oliver, once he is unmasked, is incredible. Before he's unmasked, is still very, very good, and Prometheus is definitely a very menacing villain before he's unmasked, but when he turns into Adrian Chase instead of Prometheus, he becomes this crazy, maniacal villain with this insane rivalry with Oliver Queen that is unmatched by any other rivalry on this show, and that really is basically, it's the main thing of this season that held it so high, and that's Prometheus, Adrian Chase, and his rivalry with Oliver Queen, aka the Green Arrow. It's that good. Not to mention that I think this season has the best fight scenes out of any season overall. Like, I do think Season 7 and 8 have certain fight scenes that are better than anything from Season 5, but overall, Season 5 has the most consistently great fight scenes, and I think that is something that matters. I also think that the writing is vastly improved in this season, probably over any other season on the show. Like, there is some cringy moments, but in terms of the dialogue from especially Adrian Chase, it's so insanely good, and also a lot of great dialogue from Oliver, and that dialogue brings out some amazing acting from these two actors. For Stephen Amell specifically, I think Season 5 is pretty clearly his best acting performances ever. Like, Season 8 comes close because of the emotional element of that, but when it comes to Stephen Amell, his acting ability is really brought out in in the insanely good dialogue of this season, and because of that, I mean, looking at episodes like What We Leave Behind, Lian Yu, and especially Capuchon, I think it's pretty clear that this is the best acted season of Arrow, and also has the best dialogue because of all those things. And on top of that, there's a very, very minimal amount of Felicity. I mean, there is some, especially like maybe near the end, like in episode 20 to 23, there is some, but for the most part, literally in the first 19 episodes of this season, there's nothing whatsoever, and I think that this season definitely deserves some acknowledgement for that, and because of all those things, this is my favorite season of Arrow. And that is my final ranking for all 8 seasons of Arrow, independent of the rest of the Arrowverse, because I will make probably other ranking videos in the future that will contain Arrow seasons, but this is just Arrow by itself. With that in mind, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.